when I got this fellowship in 2015, I kept my own interests at the heart of it, which was in the Devadasi system, the female professionals in the arts, and attached myself to SNA, which itself was very experimental because I didn't go to a university. I wanted to look at the archives that already existed there. The reason being, there's enough hype, as you all know, about the barbarity of Indian civilization, and the women are taken as the symptom of that. The poor condition of our women, which we are not trying to wish away, but by highlighting an agency and a knowledge system which women artists presented, I wanted to dull the edge of that criticism. I wanted to inquire. I went to the publications and to the website to look at the metadata, and I found, it's in front of you, that only 16% of the total fellows from 1952 onwards have been women. Only 26% of recipients of SNA awards have been women. And if it comes to instrumental music, then it's only 4%. All in all, in terms of recording, only about 600 artists, women artists, and this includes folk, classical, people who were interviewed, visiting foreign dancers and performers, include all the women. This is really quite a marginal presence, given that there is 9040 hours of video and 8025 hours of audio in the SNA holdings. So I think the question became, what do these numbers mean? I feel women musicians unusually and very successfully combine these things. Dance with music, of course, solo art forms with heterosexual community support structures, a life of pain, suffering, and humiliation with the economy of pleasure. I wanted to read this out. And the feminine voice, some work has been done on this by Amlan Das Gupta, by Amanda Weidman, also on Lata Mangeshkar, to talk about the feminine voice. They combine that with the strength needed to sing. Any male singer will tell you, they talk about, the strength is almost equivalent in Drupa to that of a wrestler. How did the women manage all this and do it in such a way that they seem to be succeeding at it? Given this, and this is where a bit of the theory part comes in, that I don't think we should classify women and men as higher and lower. It's not a matter of equity, that if men can drive buses, women can too, or if men can fight, women can too. It's not that. It's that there's a different approach, which if we do not look at, we might lose out on understanding the classical arts, which we have representatives of even today. My own work on the temple orchestras in Tamil Nadu showed that. The Periya Melam and the Chinna Melam, the one organized around the Nagaswaram virtuoso, the other organized around the Devadasi, had this exchange, aesthetic exchange, within a joint community system. And what's therefore interesting is that it's not just to begin with, the fact that the numbers are low, but that they are also, different. They are two parallel but separate approaches to music which we may look at. There was something which was making women musicians disappear from the scene. And I mean the musicians of that time. I don't mean the new crop, I mean the musicians who had already got well known. What was it that was leading to their disappearance in that sense? So I went to, and I want to go through the next few slides very quickly because many of you may already be aware of this. Why this statistical lowered presence, it was a puzzle for me, because there's a lot of literature, and I don't want to read it out at all, in history, in inscriptions, in documentation, that there were all sorts of large numbers of women's communities of performers attached to temples, to courts, to bhagats, deras. There was a huge presence. Not only were they present, but they were visible. And these were not as individuals, stray individuals. They were there as presence. They were in a statistical presence. And in fact, they used to see the star as a woman very often. Like Veena Dhanamal from the Devadasi tradition was very much a person who believed in this earlier system of performance within the smaller groups and gatherings, and they organized themselves around them at that time. So there was a lot of historical evidence. Equally, there's a lot of travelers' evidence. There's a lot of evidence, interestingly, that these skilled artists, I want you to pay a little attention to this, that, see, skill has its own recognition, its own empowerment, that many visitors remarked on the control of these women over the musical material. And we are talking here of 17th century. Now, the moment you have skilled women professionals, you pay attention. There's something about skill, a prodigy, a talent, which makes you note, take attention. And this is as far back as the 17th century. And I won't go on, but there are others where the British travelers, earlier travelers, remarked about it. The recording industry evidence is incredible. There were thousands of recordings made in Kolkata. And what's interesting, and there's a lot of proof of this, not only that, they were paid a lot. People like the early Gohar Jan and others made as much as 3,000 rupees per recording. You know, I'm not able to give you photographic evidence because of copyright. I had some lovely photographs. I can't show them, but there is visual evidence too of these women in the recording studio, because the people in that industry preferred the women. And they were very wealthy because of that also. And later on, Begum Akhtar, Siddheshwari Devi ji took over these traditions of recording for the industry. And there's no doubt that they were the more predominant presence. What happened? Just to finish with that previous, D.K. Pattamal, Gangubai Hangal, M.S. Subbulakshmi, they became known more widely through their HMV recordings. In fact, Gangubai says in her autobiography, my friend Anuradha gave me that autobiography in English translated, that she learned a lot from listening to records of Zorabai Agrewali. She would go and keep listening to that music, and that's how she learned the Hindustani classical also, besides other ways. Therefore, there was a huge interlinkage of an aesthetic sort through the recording industry. After independence, and you know, this is a fact. Now, I'm not trying to justify what happened or didn't happen, but we must face facts, is the aim of trying to show this. And I can get away with it because I have no axe to grind. I'm not a performer. I'm coming here, as I've said right at the start, with a parallel interest, but I think it's important for the world's history of arts to have that statement. What happened? There was a concrete move to put a ban or a censorship on. Vallabhbhai Patel says, we cannot have women whose private life is a public scandal. This is a well-known quote. It's been quoted in many places. And so they were banned from being recorded in the official studios. Of course, the 1947 legal ban on temple dedication, which I know more about, it was very paradoxical because the Devadasis had already stopped dancing in the 30s. But the ban came out more to enable a new class of dancer to be able to dance, and they indeed carry forward the tradition in a different way. And they did do that. It was more to enable that change that there had to be a legal ban against the earlier community. Now, Hindustani music is well known the world through by the Gharana concept. And to add to this missing data puzzle, which I've already mentioned, that why are so few women in the recordings of one of the most prestigious, oldest government institutions like SNA? The other question puzzling was, once again, not for equity, कि भाई आदमी है तो औरत क्यों नहीं है? Not like that. Why is there no woman's gharana? Why are all the gharanas of Hindustani classical music explicitly focused around a male artist as founder? And at the end of the talk, there is a list. I don't want to, many of you will already know, but I do want to say there's a list where you see that women were there, of course, but they were as shishyas or exponents, not as the genitors of that gharana. In fact, women themselves, this is important, did not see themselves cut out for public recognition as gurus. Annapurna ji, I marvel at her reclusive genius. She has abstained from performing right from the 50s. And she has prodigious talent as a teacher. Now she herself was herself only a conduit for Baba Alauddin Khan, her father. Even though the people she has taught, Uma is here, Hari Prasad Chaurasya, she's written a book on that. Hari Prasad Chaurasya, people like Nikhil Banerjee have trained under Annapurna ji. But she has never ever, my title cover showed that, she sees herself only mediating between her father, Baba, and her students. And she's completely in recluse. I mean, she's a recluse. She's still alive, but I can never see her. This is my wish to be able to at least refer to her. Similarly, there are many such stories, and you will know them already. Aladia Khan, it is Mogubai Kurdikar and Kishori Amonkar which enabled that gharana to establish itself over time, because otherwise he had no offspring. So where would the gharana come from? Even in the dance and music traditions, the Devadasis I interviewed recognized 10 generations or more of ancestry from their female ancestors. But when you asked about their credentials, they were attached to a male guru tradition. This was for sure. And the guru's household was seen as yours, not the household of the mother. Therefore, I would like to say, there was something going on. Now here, the European intellectualism is being opposed to Indian casteism, familialism, that we are hereditary, and the European systems were intellectual. The gharana got marginalized even by the modern recording industry, by the modern pedagogy or education, where they and the Muslim issue came in there, where they were seen as jealous, petty, keeping people out, keeping women out, and therefore we should have a more open approach. We must encourage women. We must encourage women even as a form of education, even if it's not going to be for a profession. And Mukund Lat, an exponent himself and music scholar, it's not very illuminating work, he says, on the gharanas, which has led to this stereotype of heredity, etc. Having said this, I mean, I don't want you to be waylaid. The only reason I've suggested those is there's a lot of literature on the gharana, but all of it seems to take for granted of what these are, even though they are quite confusing in their actual understanding of what these gharanas consist of. But what about the people themselves? This peculiar thing that was mentioned. What about the men themselves? Now here I go into a field where, you see, for the male guru, and I have here eminent women who have practiced, they will know that for the male guru, it was not backward at all to belong to a gharana. You, in fact, raised yourself, you Sanskritized yourself if you started to belong to a male-focused gharana, which is why? Because in the pre-modern conditions, you were part of a community. As I said earlier, very often, the women were better known than you. The women were earning more than you. And you were able, through the gharana tradition, to come out and establish a clean image for yourself and keep your own women out, because that is something which is more possible to combine with the professional life for men, not so for women. Now, therefore, for a paradoxical definition, you might say, the traditional gharana is very modern, especially in its male focus. And that is because it was able to accommodate modernity better. Now, this is a very sociological statement. You may say, what is this? Talk about family and sex and women and men, and it's all scurrilous. Let's forget about it. But we can't. We have to pay attention to these changes because they have entered how the new class of dancers are different and good on the basis of a separate kind of difference. But when we talk of these earlier traditions, you can't wish away the fact that the men who were shadowy sarangi players, trainers, they used to say that symbol, jhalre wale, that is what the Devadasis used to say, wo to jhalra chalate the. they suddenly found space. The Nagaswaram players, they were eminent but less known. That they emerged from the invisibility, and proverbially they had been in competition with their sisters and women peers. Now they were able to establish themselves as superior. In fact, they were able to do very well for themselves. The Nagaswaram art form did better as the Devadasi's art form declined. Unfortunately, Amlan Dasgupta also talks about this. This competition and cooperation between the men and women has not really been examined enough. And work has been done on the ballet, the Western ballet, where they show you that the star system depends on competition and cooperation. You can't have a star able to survive if there's no community competition and cooperation to keep their careers going. And there's need for this. He has given a rich body of anecdotal evidence, very, very interesting, on how the male and the women used to be in competition and cooperation with one another. Today, as we all know, the music has become an personal amateur discipline, an individual accomplishment. Most importantly, it is not seen as a livelihood. It's not, you're not on anybody's payroll. Usually, if you're a classical woman artist particularly, you're not part of any payroll. Next slide, please. But the negative side, one, of course, the extreme difficulty. Shannoji is sitting here who has talked to me about it. The difficulty of being able to establish your own musical identity in the light of the past, which you were not responsible for, but it had happened. But more than that, your skills, now this is something the sociologist is saying, feminine skills get devalued. And this has a ripple effect, because the emerging industries of mass, we know about them, the cinema, the television world, then there are always lower fees for women artists. This is well known, because it has been devalued. Feminine skill has been devalued, and it is most evident in the commercial entertainment world of cinema. If this is the case, we can say that Gharana, a woman's Gharana, it was always there, but it was reflective of something earlier than the contemporary modernity. Now, I don't want to confuse you too much, but I do want you to pay a little attention, and I'm in my concluding slides. It's a difficult thing to say, but it has to be said, that modernization of the kind we are familiar with, it was antagonistic to female professionalism in the arts. I'm not talking about female performance, but professionalism in the classical arts. There was a new work ethic. We are part of it. You get wage or salary. And these very independent, charismatic, public models of professionalism began to be denounced as destructive of family values, marriage, and householding. It is true that it wasn't just these kinds of reform measures, which even Bhatkande and others through education had put, that women should develop character through music and not a profession. But it is also true, and I find this ironic, that even the Mughal ruler Aurangzeb, I have to quote this, there was a decree that all dancing women must give up music and marry. This was during his period, but brought out by an observer. I find it ironic that the modern Indian reformists arguing for the anti-notch bill in Tanjore district were saying very similar things. That stop dancing, you get married. And they were pushing for the same thing. But what happens in the process is that willy-nilly the market promotes men. They are better able to travel. They can live in the guru's establishment once you have a different class of musician. It promotes the market also under garb of individualism. Today, there's no doubt, and this is what the archives told me, there is many more men, please excuse that, who are singing professionally. There are more women students, but the gurus are primarily male. And market forces are devaluing female professional skills, as I mentioned. This is because as commercialization sets in, women will always suffer because money goes where women do not. That is the way it has always been. Under this new language, it is seen as gender exploitation, the past, and also the professional network has disappeared. There's no professional network. In fact, what the women had been able to in the past, the professional ethic. Next one, please. Women. They had very well been able to combine, or rather what men were able to do was combine the grihasti, which is a man and a woman in marriage with children, with Gharana, with students and teachers. But women cannot do that. I take this as a fact. I don't want to, they are not able to do that. In fact, whatever was the nature of past custom, I want to highlight that there was some earlier kind of modernity to it, if I may put it like that. How before the contemporary feminist discourse of the single woman, today this is all in the public domain, single woman, woman's work, single motherhood, women-headed households. How did performance art flourish earlier? It was neither part of the grihasti, the family, nor was it part of the brothel, no way. It was able to avoid that. Equally, how was a woman's fertility allowed to flourish outside the Gharana? It was a much earlier time. Next slide, please. So let's put it like this, that many of the questions raised by earlier women performers are eternal questions. Women know this when they practice and when they perform. And I've measured them. How do you become a star without becoming isolated? How do you know and keep a man without being conjugal and dependent and domestically in servitude? How do you, all these are very relevant contemporary questions which need to still be asked. Not only that, the last line, the education and credentialing and trade organization was also done by the community, which is no longer possible. So what the community was able to do, the family cannot do for the profession or for the performance. It's far more, the nuclear family impetus has been absolutely disastrous for the woman's classical music traditions. It's not possible. It's very difficult because they used to do this network bridging and bonding. M.S. Subbulakshmi, I want to take the example of two well-known. Despite her profound talent, she was not permitted to teach as long as she formed part of a grihasti arrangement with Sadashivam, her Brahmin husband. Otherwise, he completely micromanaged her career, and to such great effect. Next slide, even Annapurna ji, who I've just talked of, she only became a legendary guru after separating from Ravi Shankar, her husband. The fact that her grihasti could never take on the functions of teaching is evident from her failure to retain her only child and son as Shishya. But her home continued to act as a training household for non-family members of extraordinary achievement and renown, as I've said. So what policy suggestions can we make? We must have a focused archive on women musicians. How do you develop courses? How do you have material on where this art form is going if we don't have enough material? And in a catalogued, organized form. Similarly, music and dance in the university disciplines. Just because we are not scripted, we have no choreography, doesn't mean that we are quaint and ethno-music. We have, the West has kept its classical genres in discussion with the world. They are talking about the canon being, they're bringing in African systems, Latin American systems, all sorts of systems to break the canon. What are we doing for ourselves? In the world of economic policy, finally, and I want to raise this because this is a controversial thing I've mentioned earlier about livelihood and art. See, at the level of economy, today in the state initiatives, we are talking about skilling India. The plea is we want to re-examine and re-look at households as skill-based, not just producing laborers or workers. Under the modern state, it is surely unacceptable that the traditional performing arts of India still are part of the informal service sector, especially because an adept, as you all know, the earlier system of music didn't relate class, upper class to performance. The Indian arts have never mirrored Western classicism's aristocratic underpinnings. Artists were usually from a lower or despised section. They needed patronage and protection. So today, when we think about what to do with the arts, class interests must not color our perception about the economic status and future of the Indian performing arts. If areas of youth potential and commitment and skill like cricket and yoga have come out of the clubs and gurukuls, women's music must come out of the middle or upper class, class family. It must be refashioned as a new woman's Gharana. What form it will take is not today's lecture's hope or ambit. I'd like to stop there. The list of Gharanas, you could leave them open, is right at the back. There are 2 slides of what Gharanas I was talking of. The last thing they can just... I do want to end by saying, please understand the method. There is, as I say, no choice in the list of women artists on my invitation card, or the fact that I have not mentioned some and mentioned others. This is purely as an example to be able to explain something other than what you all are better informed about, those who perform. That's one. And secondly, about the photos, as I said, there is a lot of visual evidence which I would like you to go on the internet even and find out for yourself. There's a lot of that. Thirdly, I again repeat that sociology and social anthropology aren't judgmental or prescriptive. We are not saying you must go, you must revive the old, not at all. The time and the past is gone. The difficult position of trying to describe what is very difficult already. Who am I to say how it should be? But there are certain writings on the wall which, if we don't pay attention to, certainly the women's performances are going to die out. I want to thank all of you, especially colleagues from the university and from the performing arts who have actually come to listen to me. Thank you for bearing with it. And thank you to my own family, to my son and my husband, Siddharth and Ashok, who both, through their own creative endeavors, have told me how difficult it is to be an independent artist in India. And it's not easy for them or for those around them. I would like to thank you all once again, SNA once again.